Pro Box fans here with none other than Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie, great to see you again, man. It's been a while. How's life?
I'm good. Fresh from Heathrow, right to Wembley. That's how we do.
Fresh from Heathrow, you're looking good, man. Because I would have looked like absolute.
Well, I checked in. I changed. I got some espresso over here. You know, I'm doing it. I'm doing the job. You know.
Listen, let's talk about why you're here. Sky Sports Boxer. You've always been affiliated with Boxer, done bits for them, but is it good just to be back in the boxing scene? We know you took a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you know, and then with Boxer, I've kind of grown with the company. I've been a part of it since its embryonic stages. It's exciting to have just watched this whole thing blossom. And being a part of it the whole time, you know, it's been cool, and I look forward to continuing to be a part of it. And I was really excited when they called me to, join up with the next big moves. You know, so it's good, it's cool.
Let's talk about this card on Saturday night. Richard Riakporhe's fighting on Saturday night. Have you seen much of Richard? And if so, what do you make of him when you compare him in such a great division?
I've worked a couple of his fights, and he's an exciting guy. He's really taken a faster track than you would think, right? But I guess he got into boxing a little bit late, had to overcome a lot both outside the ring and inside the ring, and it's made tremendous strides. I mean, I think a lot of people will be surprised, but it goes to show you the passion that he trains with, the determination that he comes with, because he's made a lot of strides in a short amount of time.
I think the fight that people want to see in that division is Richard Riakporhe and Lawrence Sokoli. We've seen what Lawrence has done. He's sort of trying to look to clean.
That's what I'm saying. Like, look, to think about, like, not that long ago, you wouldn't have even thought about that, right? And now, you know, and even Lawrence, I mean, came a long way in a short amount of time himself. I mean, that story with Lawrence, with, you know, from McDonald's brand to watching the Olympics to, I think he was an Olympian himself then, right? And then becoming a world champion. He's a difficult guy to deal with. And Riakporhe, you know, kind of has that overcome the odds kind of mentality as well. You know, from a rough area, a real rough story. It's just such a pleasure to talk to. I mean, you would think like this. You would never suspect this guy had to overcome the things he's overcome, and he's here. He's on the doorstep. You know, fighting an ex-world title challenger, and really an ex-world title challenger who. I've told a couple of people, if I'm him, I'm pissed off, man. I mean, he just missed out on the Canelo sweepstakes. He lost to Makabu, and now Makabu gets the Canelo fight, and he's got to get Riakporhe. It's no easy task for a lot less money. So he's going to have a motivated guy in front of him, but Riakporhe shows up motivated all the time. He's exciting TV. He's always a pleasure to speak to, and I think he's a very marketable, promotable guy. And with a key win here on Saturday, with an impressive win here on Saturday, I really think he puts himself in position for the conversation now with a Coley or any of the other Cruiserweight champions. You know, he's in the conversation at that point, because now if you're able to win Saturday, you will have beaten a former world title challenger.
You know, just talking about that point that you made there about these two getting fast track, Lawrence Coley, Richard Riakporhe sort of pushing on very quickly, is that something that you find happens more with the heavier guys? Like, we even looked at Joshua, for example, became a champion at a very young stage.
Yeah, I guess because, and not to downplay the bigger guys, because sometimes they're way more exciting a lot of times, but I think the skill is not as high all the time because they're slower, they're bigger, and it's more of a power game a lot of times. You know, you have a lot to overcome with smaller weight classes where there's so much more skill involved because it's not as much power game, right? So I think sometimes guys can get a later start in the bigger weight classes and succeed. You don't typically see it in the smaller weight classes because there's less margin for error in the skill department because everything's a little bit faster. But nonetheless, I mean, it's super impressive. I mean, regardless, I mean, it's the things you see. And you've got to do it both in the amateurs and the pros. You know, Coley himself did it in the amateurs, and then he's done it in the pros. Riakporhe, I don't know about what kind of extent of an amateur career he had, but in the pros, he's been really overcoming one hurdle after another impressively. You know, so I can remember when I was an amateur, there was a guy named Michael Bennett in the U.S. He ended up becoming a really good amateur in a short amount of time. Then in the pros, he was a bust. You know what I'm saying? And he was a guy who had a late start as well. And I think he made the Olympic team. I think he lost to Savone actually. But nonetheless, in the pros, he didn't go anywhere. You know, so to have the success to string it along even into the pro career and have had a late start, not an easy thing to do. And it's exciting to watch a guy do it, especially a guy with the pleasure to be around like Riakporhe. You know, he's really a real pleasure to be around. He's a guy who's really lovely in a way that, you know, you speaking to him, you can really feel his story and his drive and really what he's about.
I want to talk about another fighter on the card, which the reason why I ask him is it relates to your weight class quite easily, is Florian Marku, somebody who was known initially for knocking people out, you know, this destructive fighter. Last few fights, obviously, he's been able to show his boxing ability. Have you seen anything about him? What do you make about him?
Listen, as you raise your level of opposition, it gets harder and harder to knock guys out, and then, so that's normal and natural. Marco has been in combat sports forever. You know, I've heard of Marco from the Albanian community in New York since before I ever even saw him fight. That's how popular he is. I expect Marco to continue to impress and continue to go up the ladder. He seems to have a pretty determined guy in front of him. This guy from the same time as Andre the Giant. Now, if anybody's old enough to remember Andre the Giant, you know, he's training in Grenoble, this guy. He's a lot shorter, but he looks just as mean. So, you know, I look forward to seeing the fight on Saturday. And Marco just came off a really exciting fight with Prodan. I would love to see a rematch with those two guys later on, because Prodan and Marco, I think, put on a good show. And they were evenly matched on that night. You know, it could have went either way. You know, Marco got the win, but I think both of them really can elevate themselves to another level in a rematch. And well, we'll see. I don't want to overlook on Saturday night. Marco's got a job to do Saturday night. He could be distracted. His wife could give birth at any moment. You know, you never know the distractions that are on his mind. But nonetheless, you heard him talk. Every single time I hear Florian talk, he loves boxing. He's determined to look his best, and you can feel his enthusiasm. And I think that Saturday night will be no different.
Just quickly want to talk about a point you just made earlier on about Canelo Makabu. Just talk to me about that. We know that Canelo sort of, it talks about him fighting at that weight, missing out the light heavies completely. Well, what do you make of that?
Chess, not checkers, though. There's a bunch of monster punches at light heavyweight. So, you know, I think it's actually a pretty intelligent move when I thought about it. It blindsided me, too. But then when I looked at the whole landscape of the decision, I'm like, you know what, it's kind of smart. You know, and I wouldn't call it cherry picking, because when you go up in weight class, you've got to kind of pick your poison. You know, it's chess, not checkers. You get fighting bigger and bigger guys. Let's remember Pernell Whitaker for Julio Cesar Vasquez, and he didn't fight Terry Norris. You know, you've got to appreciate the fact that guys do this, but they've got to also keep in mind that, you know, fighting too many guys that are too naturally bigger and too good at the same time starts to put them too much behind the eight ball. So I actually thought it was a really, really intelligent choice, because at light heavyweight there's too many big punchers, and you kind of will let that weight class shuffle itself around. But in the meantime, you can try to pick off a Cruiserweight championship against a lesser known, maybe more beatable fighter.
With Canelo then, where does it stop for him? Because does it get to a point where he goes too high a weight class, then maybe the power sort of shows?
I mean, come on. We're talking about morons if we're talking about Canelo fighting at heavyweight. You know, you're a moron. I mean, I know a lot of you morons are going to say it too. I mean, if he wins the fight, I know there's going to be a lot of you morons talking about him fighting at heavyweight. You know you exist out there. You know I am. You know right now you're looking at me and you're saying, Paulie's right. Yeah, I'm a moron. Paulie's right, yeah. Because you probably were already thinking about, I wonder what he would do at heavyweight, because you're a moron, that's why. So realistically speaking, I think Cruiserweight, the way he's entering it, maybe against a lesser known, maybe weaker champion, you get that. You see how the light heavyweight division shuffles out. Maybe you come back down to light heavyweight. You know, I was just posed a pretty good question from my colleague at BlueMoonFight.tv. Can he even make super middleweight anymore? I saw him last week. If he puts on too much muscle mass at cruiserweight, I saw him last week. He was dried out making super middleweight. I saw his lips all fight week. They were dried out. I know that feeling. So if he puts on too much muscle mass making cruiserweight, can he even make super middleweight? Interesting thing to think about. But let's see what he does at cruiserweight first.
I want to quickly ask you on a prediction for a fight happening this weekend in back home for yourself.
Crawford and Porter, good fight, really exciting fight. One of the better fights you can make at welterweight. Both guys really top class. I look at the comparison of this fight. I look at one opponent I think about for Crawford when I look at the Porter fight. Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn was a physical guy, liked to push you around, liked to make it really ugly, dirty, and try to disrupt you. Horn had almost no success against Crawford. Incredible. You know, I was really shocked. So by that token, by seeing it that way, I can see Crawford handling Porter, which would really surprise a lot of people. But because of the way he handled Horn, it really, really makes me feel like Porter is the one who's up against it. We'll see.
Paulie, what's the general feel about that fight in America? Because for whatever reason, I don't feel like it's getting the promotion that it should be getting.
You know what it is? Crawford's a great fighter, but neither is a big personality. You know, when it's a Canelo fight week, there's the pizzazz of the big flavor of the Viva Mexico type of fan base. You know, they're always very passionate about everything. I don't think Porter and Crawford they're great fighters, but have very charismatic personalities, nor do they bring a very passionate fan base. But nonetheless, for your true boxing fan, it's a terrific boxing fans fight. And I think it's a fight that even the crossover media should be talking about, because it's really two top guys.
Cool, Paulie. Always a pleasure chatting to yourself. Thank you so much for giving me time, and no doubt we'll see you soon. Top man, appreciate that. Thank you.